The moment the lights went out and 12 strangers stared at me in the dark, I knew something was wrong. Not just with the storm, no, that was obvious, but something deeper, something off, something that was going to change everything. I stood behind the counter of my diner holding a flashlight that barely lit the cracked linoleum beneath my boots. Snow pelted the windows so hard it sounded like fists. And those men 12 truckers soaked cold and silent were watching me like I was the only thing between them and something worse than the weather. And maybe I was. But let me tell you how we got there, because it didn't start like this. 3 hours earlier, when they first walked in, I was relieved. I'd been praying for customers all week. My little diner, parked on a forgotten highway in Wyoming, barely made enough to keep the coffee hot. But then the snow came fast, harder than the forecast warned, and right behind it one semi after another rolled in like an answered prayer. At first it felt like luck. 12 big rigs, 12 tired men. I had chili on the stove, cornbread in the oven, and for the first time in weeks, the place felt alive. I poured coffee. I joked with them. I even turned up the old jukebox in the corner just to drown out the sound of the wind trying to rip the roof off. Then somewhere between refilling mugs and frying eggs, the storm hit its peak and the diner died. Total blackout. No lights, no heat, no stove, no refrigerator. My breath fogged in the air. The only light came from the emergency exit sign glowing weakly above the door and the pale, violent snow outside the window. "Is this normal?" one of the truckers asked. I shook my head, trying to hide the panic in my gut. Backup generators been out for months. Long story. They weren't amused. And honestly, neither was I. Because I knew what we were facing. Trapped. No electricity, no phones, no help. And 12 men I didn't know all looking at me like I owed them something. And maybe I did. Maybe kindness is a kind of debt. So I moved fast. Found the old camping stove in the back. Used up the last of the propane. Cooked what I could, beaned some soup toast on a pan. They thanked me at first. But then came the questions, the impatience, the pacing. And then he spoke. He called me doll. Told me I should have planned better. That a woman running a place like this alone was just asking for trouble. He laughed, but it didn't sound friendly, more like a warning. That's when I felt the shift. Not in the storm, but in them. I stepped outside into the storage shed just to breathe. My hands were shaking and not from the cold. I looked back at the diner through the frosted window. It didn't look like mine anymore. It looked like a trap, a snow-covered cage full of strangers. I wiped my eyes and told myself to hold it together, because if I didn't, no one would. I came back in with 2 lanterns and a forced smile. "Let's make this work," I said. And we did, kind of, for a while. But even then I had this feeling, like something was coming. A few hours later I would learn just how right I was. Supplies would vanish, accusations would fly, and the air would grow colder, not from the storm outside, but from the things people do when no one's watching. But that's another part of the story. For now, all I can say is this. When you run a diner on the edge of nowhere, you get used to quiet nights. You get used to slow business, bad coffee, and cheap tips. But nothing prepares you for a night like this. When 12 truckers walk in from a storm, and one of them never plans to leave. I wish I could say things got better after the lights went out, that we pulled together like some feel-good story you'd see on TV. But real life isn't like that. Real life is messy. People get scared, and when they're scared, they get ugly. The first sign of trouble wasn't shouting or fighting. It was silence. The kind that creeps in when everyone's holding their breath, pretending everything's fine when it's not. I used up the last of the propane around midnight. We were down to a pot of lukewarm soup and stale bread. Most of the truckers took it with a tired nod or a grunt of thanks, but he didn't. "You call this food?" he barked, pushing the bowl away like it offended him. "You got 12 grown men in here and you're serving prison scraps." I stared at him. The name stitched on his jacket read Roy, but the look in his eyes read danger. He was the kind of man who didn't just want warmth and food, he wanted control. "Roy," I said calmly, "you're welcome to leave anytime. No one's stopping you." That earned a few nervous chuckles from the others, but Roy wasn't laughing. He leaned in close enough for me to smell the tobacco on his breath. "You got no idea who you're talking to, sweetheart." "Maybe not. but I knew what I was dealing with: a man who thought a blizzard gave him permission to be a bully. After that, the mood shifted. Some of the guys tried to lighten things up, one even played harmonica near the jukebox, like it would bring power back. But the tension never left. It just settled in the corners, waiting for a crack to pour through. That crack came the next morning. I was counting cans in the pantry, planning out breakfast, when I realized 3 were gone. Just gone. And not the cheap stuff either, the good beans, the kind I'd been saving. At first I thought maybe I'd miscounted. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I'd used them in the soup and forgot. But when I went to the register to check inventory, the truth slapped me clean in the face. The cash drawer was light. Not empty, but light. A good $70 short. Enough to sting. I closed the drawer slowly, my heart hammering in my chest. Who would steal now from me when I was feeding them, letting them take shelter in my place? That's when I realized something else. It wasn't just fear in that room anymore. It was suspicion. Everyone had started eyeing each other, whispering in corners. Roy, of course, acted like nothing was wrong. He was too loud, too confident. But the others, they were quiet in a different way, shifty, careful. I walked back into the dining room with my arms crossed tight. If anyone's missing something, I suggest you speak up now, I said, voice clear, steady. Because I am. A few heads turned. A couple truckers looked around, pretending they didn't hear me. One guy, maybe early 30s with a kind face, asked, "What's missing food?" I said, "Cash." No one responded. Not a single word. I opened my door to you. I added louder now. I gave what little I had. And this is how it goes. Still nothing. That was my emotional cut the moment I saw my kindness being twisted into weakness. That's when I understood these men didn't see a woman doing her best to keep them fed. They saw a woman alone, vulnerable. And that to some of them looked like opportunity. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I locked the pantry. I moved the cash drawer to the office, and I kept a heavy wrench behind the counter. I wasn't about to lose my dignity or my diner to a blizzard or a group of restless men with secrets in their eyes. They didn't know me. Not really. But by the time that storm ended, they would. I heard the crash before I saw him. Metal on tile. Then a muffled groan that turned my blood cold. Mike, the youngest of the truckers, barely 30, was curled up on the floor next to booth 3. His face was ashen, lips tinged blue. His whole body trembled like a leaf caught in the wind. "What's going on?" I dropped to my knees beside him. He didn't answer right away, just clutched his chest with one hand and his stomach with the other. "I've got a condition," he muttered. "Heartburn, ulcers, something. I've got pills for it in the truck cab." I stared out the frosted window. His rig was nearly invisible under the weight of snow. It was 100 feet away, maybe more, and the wind outside could rip skin straight off the bone. He'd never make it in this state. Neither would I. I wrapped him in 2 blankets and laid him across the booth, tossing every dish towel I had into the microwave, not to warm them, because we had no power, but just to feel like I was doing something. Then I called out, "Does anyone here have medical training?" One older man, Don, I think, raised a hand. Retired paramedic. "Let me take a look." He checked Mike's pulse, pressed on his abdomen, then pulled me aside. "He needs that medication," he whispered. "And if it's heart-related, we're on the clock." I nodded, trying to swallow the panic rising in my throat. No heat, no help, no way out. And now maybe a dying man. I stepped back behind the counter to clear my head. That's when I heard it whispers. Sharp, fast, secretive. Coming from the hallway by the storage room. I crept closer, careful not to make a sound. 2 truckers. Not Roy this time. Different voices. One said, "She's getting suspicious." The other, "Doesn't matter. We finish tonight and disappear. Finish what they weren't here by accident." That realization hit me harder than the cold ever could. This storm hadn't just stranded them, it had trapped me with them. I backed away, heart thudding in my ears. My diner, my home, had become something I didn't recognize. I returned to the dining area, calm on the outside, but on fire inside. I checked the register. The cash drawer had even less than before, and someone had pried open the back door to the pantry. Someone was stealing, watching, lying, and I was stuck in here with them. I grabbed the wrench I'd hidden under the counter earlier. If things got worse, I wasn't going to be a silent victim. Not again. I've always believed people reveal themselves when the heat's on, or in this case, when it's off. You'd be amazed how quickly someone's true nature shows up in a blackout. Roy was still loud, still obnoxious, but now I realized he was a distraction. The real threat was the quiet ones, the planners, the ones who never looked you in the eye. Mike moaned in pain, pulling me back to the moment. "Hang in there," I whispered to him. "Morning's coming." But I wasn't sure if I believed that anymore. Because something told me this storm wasn't over, not the one outside, and definitely not the one inside these walls. Something was coming. And when it did, I needed to be ready. If this story has you on edge, like it had me that night, if you felt that tension, that gut-deep fear of being trapped with people you no longer trust, then do me a favor. Hit the like button, share this story, and drop a comment below. I want to know, what would you have done in my shoes? And don't forget to follow for the next chapter. Because trust me, things are about to take a turn I never saw coming. By dawn, the wind had calmed to a whisper, like the storm had finally exhaled. Snow still blanketed everything in sight, but you could tell it was over. The worst had passed. But inside the diner, it was still thick with something heavier than snow. Silence. Suspicion. That sick feeling that even though the storm was done, something else was still hanging in the air. Mike made it through the night barely. He was pale, weak, but breathing. I sat beside him for most of the morning, watching the light shift through the icicle-lined windows. No plows, no rescue, just the soft creak of settling wood and the occasional cough or whisper. Then, without warning, 4 of the truckers gathered their gear. "We're heading out," one of them said gruffly. "No thank you. No goodbye. Roads are still dangerous," I told them. "You could get stuck again. We'll take our chances." I noticed it immediately. One of them carried a duffel I hadn't seen before, heavy, bulging at the seams. "Leave it," I said instinctively. He stared at me. "It's mine." "Funny," I said. "Never saw you bring it in." Roy stepped in, tried to ease the tension. "Let it go, sweetheart. You don't want more trouble." But I did, because I was tired of the lies, tired of the fear, tired of people thinking they could walk into my life and treat it like a rest stop. "Put the bag down," I repeated firmer. We locked eyes. A long beat passed, then he dropped it. Without a word, the 4 of them turned and walked out, boots crunching through the snow, leaving the diner and its ghosts behind. I waited until they were gone before I unzipped the duffel. Inside, canned food, bottled water, packs of cigarettes, a wad of cash, and one strange thing, a map. Not a road map, something else. Hand-drawn, marked up with notes, names, places circled in red ink. I didn't understand it then. Still don't, not fully. But it wasn't random, and it wasn't innocent. They were planning something. Using the storm to move supplies. Maybe worse. I don't know, and maybe I don't want to. I took the map, stuffed it in my office drawer, and locked it away. The others left over the next few hours, one by one. A couple gave half-hearted thanks. One man offered to pay for his meals. He was the only one who did. When the last truck rolled out of the lot, I stood at the front window, arms crossed, watching the taillights vanish into the white distance. It was finally over. Or maybe it never really will be. Because that storm didn't just tear through the highway, it tore through me. It changed the way I looked at people. At kindness. At trust. But here's the strange thing. A few days later, after I restocked, cleaned up, and got the power back on, someone came by. A stranger in a black coat. He didn't order food, just handed me an envelope with no return address. Inside, $700 in cash. No note, no name, just money. Was it guilt, a warning, a payment? I'll never know. But it told me one thing loud and clear. Someone out there remembered what happened that night, and maybe they weren't done with me yet. The diner's still standing, still quiet most days, but I keep the wrench behind the counter. I installed cameras, and I trust a little slower now, but I also learned something I never expected. I'm stronger than I thought. I can survive the kind of night that tests your soul, and I'll be ready if it ever happens again. Bantas. If this story left you wondering what was in that map, if it gave you chills like it gave me that night, then don't keep it to yourself. Hit that like button, share it with someone who loves a good mystery, and tell me in the comments, what do you think those truckers were really up to? And don't forget to follow. There's more where this came from, because out here on the highway, not every storm ends when the snow stops falling.